The border continues to remain a politically potent issue going into the 2024 election season as both sides blame the other for refusing to fix the problem. During a quick meeting with the press on the way to Marine One, Biden said he couldn't do anything more on fixing the border unless a contentious new Senate bill made its way to his desk. Let's watch.
Have you done everything you can do with executive authority, or is there more you could do?
That's not all I can do. Just give me the power. I've asked for the very day I got in office. Give me the border patrol. Give me the people. Give me the people, the judges. Give me the people who can stop this and make it work.
But Republicans disagree. They say Biden is willfully derelict in doing his duty to protect the southern border, and that states like Texas are forced to pick up the slack. Texas Governor Greg Abbott said as much on a Fox News appearance yesterday. Let's take a look.
This is the number one issue in America. Americans want a secure border. If Joe Biden federalizes our National Guard, that would be the biggest political blunder that he could make. And that's why I think he will not do it. That said, of course, I am prepared in the event that they do make such a blunder to make sure that Texas will be able to continue to secure our border.
Meanwhile, Republicans faced questions regarding former President Trump's role in stalling the previously mentioned border bill. The former president has openly said he thinks passing the bill is a mistake and has attacked Senator James Lankford over his collaboration with Senators Chuck Schumer in drafting it. Trump has openly urged his allies in Congress to block the bill, but when pressed on this by CNN's Manu Raju, House Speaker Mike Johnson seemed to deny that this was happening. Let's watch.
The former president has made it clear that he doesn't want you guys to move forward on this, and judging by his comments, he clearly wants to campaign on this issue. Have you spoken to him about the Senate proposal, and are you simply trying to kill this to help him out in the campaign?
No, Manu, that's absurd. We have a responsibility here to do our duty. Our duty is to do right by the American people, to protect the people. The first and most important job of the federal government is to protect its citizens. We're not doing that under President Biden. We have only a tiny, as you know, razor-thin, actually a one-vote majority right now in the House. Our majority is small. We only have it in one chamber, but we're trying to use every ounce of leverage that we have to make sure that this issue is addressed. I have talked to former President Trump about this issue at length, and he understands that. He understands that we have a responsibility to do here. The president, of course, President Trump, wants to secure the country. President Trump is the one that talked about border security before anyone else did. He ran on, as you remember, building the wall. Why? Because he saw this catastrophe coming. He knew that if we did not get control of it, we would be in this situation. And that's why President Trump took executive actions. He used his executive authority to get that system under control. President Biden came in reflexively and did exactly the opposite. And that is what has caused this crisis. It is well documented. I'm happy to share with you all, if you haven't seen it yet, our documentation of the 64 actions they've taken. At least half of those, more than half, could be immediately reversed with a stroke of a pen. And Joe Biden refuses to do it. And it is outrageous to us. Yes, ma'am.
House GOP efforts to seemingly quash the bill come as Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas faces 2 articles of impeachment over what Republicans have said is a failure to prevent an invasion at the southern border. Yeah, again, maybe you can help me understand. The posture that Republicans are taking right now is to say, here's a bill that addresses the border crisis in a, frankly, I think objectively much more meaningful, you can call it more conservative, whatever way than the kinds of policies Democrats have agreed to in the past. And I think the extreme nature of the bill that Democrats say they're now behind is reflective of how desperate they are to pass to funding for Ukraine and Israel. That being said, the posture of the Republican Party right now is no, we don't want to take this deal. We don't want to take this bill, not citing any evidence that they think they can get a more aggressive bill or that there's much in the way of specifics that they want that's not in this bill, but just saying that they want Joe Biden to do it via executive authority. So you have legislators saying that they would prefer a Democratic president using executive fiat to do something, shut down the border, rather than taking what is in their power to get enormous amounts of billions of additional funding for border guards, get more administrative law judges to process these asylum claims so people aren't caught and released, as so many people have complained about. And all of this, that would be an enormous benefit to people addressing what Republicans are describing as a crisis, which is a historically high number of border crossings happening right now. They're saying, no, we don't want that. We're going to keep fighting this out.
Well, obviously, some Republicans do want it. It's a Republican bill that was worked on
You're right.
that McConnell is in support of, and Senator James Lankford put together.
Yeah.
And the problem is that a lot of conservative voters and media consumers and more conservative members who are loyal to Donald Trump oppose the bill for a variety of reasons. One being, obviously, they don't want to give Joe Biden anything to run on whatsoever that's positive. I think that's fair. But also, they don't think it goes far enough, frankly. They think any sort of putting into law and practice that we will allow a certain number of illegal border crossings before more aggressive steps can be taken is something conservatives don't want. They want, on paper, to be there zero illegal border crossings, and they don't want to commit that to law. They also don't want to fund Ukraine, for sure, is a major conservative issue. So McConnell wants to do it. Members of the Republican elite want to do it. A lot of MAGA don't anyway. So a bill that doesn't accomplish, from their standpoint, what they want on immigration, but also is tied to Ukraine funding, is a lose-lose, according to people who are still very loyal to Trump. And you can see in Mike Johnson's remarks there that Trump is against it, so they're against it.
Yeah, so I think that's a big part of the story. And Mike Johnson's denial that it is seems, just very uncredible given the very public statements Donald Trump has been making about wanting to shut down any Democratic legislative effort.
It's still Donald Trump's party. He opposes this legislation, so they'd be crazy not to.
But I am interested in having a conversation about what to actually do about the border crisis, because I don't know. I think most Americans are more invested in what's happening at the border and whether or not it is in fact secure than what is personally beneficial for Donald Trump. So on one level, it is a little bizarre to say, I can maybe see this argument if Donald Trump were doing very poorly in the polls, if he looked like he wasn't going to be able to beat Biden, if he needed extra juice in the fight against Biden, that maybe justified putting American citizens in a position, in his words, to suffer mightily because of this immigration crisis. I think that maybe he could justify that on that ground, saying, well, it's more important for me to be president because there's a whole kit and caboodle of things that I have to take care of. So sit this one out, America. You're going to have to suffer the vagaries I've been describing for years at the border because my electoral chances are more important. But he's not even in a desperate electoral situation. Quite to the contrary, he is excelling already. So then to say that I'm going to block Biden's this bipartisan border legislation, which I want to be really clear about. You keep saying, and people keep framing it as it would allow this number of illegal border crossings. What this says is that currently under our immigration policy, people can come and they can claim asylum. We have constitutional legal rights to asylum in this country. What causes the backlog and what causes so many people who have not had their asylum claims vetted and processed to be here undocumented is that there are not enough people to process those claims given the volume of people that have come across the border. So what the legislation does is it doesn't stop or not stop illegal border crossings. There's no way to just magically do that. We don't have a electric dog fence across the border. What it says is that normally you have to allow people to hang around while we have their asylum claims processed. You're not allowed to just eject people from the country because we have certain constitutional protections for people who are seeking asylum rights. What this says is if border crossings are over a certain amount, then it kicks in. We no longer have to respect our constitutional obligations to address people's asylum claims. So regardless of if that is at 5,000 or at immediately, the argument, the zero argument is not that there will be zero border crossings. It's that we are going to absolutely reject this fundamental American asylum principle, the principles that are inscribed on the base of the Statute of Liberty, the principle that allowed so many people to come here as they were fleeing persecution across the world, and say we're basically going to reject our entire asylum system. And part of Biden's bill is saying we don't have to do that if we simply just fund our asylum system better, and we can process these claims in 6 months instead of the 5 years that it takes for people to get through, and then you wouldn't have all these people languishing here uncertain of whether or not they have a real claim or not.
What Trump and his supporters, who are a majority of the Republican Party, want is more of a total shutdown of the border, including the asylum claims. They want zero illegal border crossings. I think they're very skeptical of the asylum system in general. I think they think people are abusing, that are claiming political asylum when they have no actual reason to do so, and are using that as a loophole to get into the country, and they want to put a stop to it.
But do you see how that's not shutting down the border in any way? People can come across the border and choose not to claim asylum.
They can come across the border and be immediately sent back. That's what Trump and his supporters want to do.
That's not what any of this is about. People no, it's not.
It is.
Robby, can I just explain what I mean by that?
Okay.
What I mean by that is if people come across the border, many of them choose to claim asylum, right?
Yes.
And they go to asylum centers and claim asylum. That, even under the limits, whether it's a zero limit or 2,000 or 3,000 or 5,000 limit, people still have the right to do. Because nothing the Republicans are doing and can do in this moment eliminates the bedrock basic, the law already in place with respect to asylum. But the difference is people who don't choose to claim asylum at these specific asylum centers, as I understand it, they later, once they're caught, can say, "Oh, I'm claiming asylum," and that would implicate those people under this new Biden law asylum system. So Republicans are saying there's going to be zero crossings at the border. That's not, in effect, what this will do. All this will do is say that people who want to make that asylum claim have to just come across and go to an asylum center. They can still make the asylum claim and hang around. Or alternatively, you're still going to get people, as always has happened, who sneak across the border, disappear into the country, work under the table, and live their lives. But the idea that because some law goes into effect, those people aren't still going to be able to sneak across the border in the same way that they've always snuck across the border, it doesn't actually change the number of border crossings.
The bill says what Republicans want is that everyone caught crossing the border gets sent back home.
Right.
That's what they want. This bill doesn't do that, so they don't support it.
Right. But they don't have an alternative to get rid of this asylum laws.
Okay, but they're not. That's why they're not going to support this bill.
Right. So what they're basically saying is they don't want to do any of the things that could actually address the crisis. Any of the things. We're not having even touched, by the way.
They think sending the people back when they're caught is the way to address it.
But that historically hasn't been the case. You have an incredible number of repeat attemptees, right? People didn't come from thousands of miles away, oftentimes on foot and in different situations, to be dropped back in Mexico 100 miles away and not try re-entry again. There's a fundamental question here that's not being addressed about why so many people are fleeing their countries to begin with, which, as we discussed, has a lot to do with American foreign policy. But secondly, there's this question of why not try to address the fundamental crisis? Why not allow funding that would process these claims and be able to reject finally, in a way with finality, people who really don't have asylum claims? Why not just say, fine, there's all of this billions of dollars of funding that Joe Biden is willing to say are going to go to our border guards and all these folks that were once characterized as American heroes because they're trying to patrol our border and keep it safe and to process these claims. Why not simply fund it so that this asylum process that frankly was one of the proudest things that our country, one of the proudest features of our country that enabled most of the American population to get here? Why shut that down instead of just funding it so that it can work, except for because you want a political stunt and you don't really care about these bedrock American values. You just care more about your own electoral chances, which aren't even really threatened in this moment.
The conservative position is that the system doesn't need more funding. Joe Biden can make different choices that are under his jurisdiction to help bring this situation under control. And Republicans are not going to. The Trump aspect of the party wants much harder caps on how many people can enter the country, legally or illegally, frankly, reject the asylum system as a loophole, and don't want to fund it any more intently. Again, I'm just giving you this is not even particularly my view. This is the conservative consensus view right now, which I'm...
It's worth noting that Trump once used the same language to shut down the U.S.-Mexico border. He didn't follow through on it. It was criticized by Democrats at the time as being draconian and xenophobic. I'm reading some reporting from the AP that's going through some of the history of how this happened. And it says that the closest that Trump ever came was during the pandemic when he used Title 42 authority Joe Biden, of course, got into hot water with his own party for not disabling that Title 42 authority, which allowed him to basically subvert the asylum process in the name of COVID. That ultimately expired before there was any constitutional review of that policy. But in so many ways, Biden has continued Donald Trump's immigration policy. And I think what everyone's going to discover is that the spike in immigration has nothing to do with any rhetoric that's coming out of any administration, has nothing to do with any of these policies, except for the fact that conditions in much of the rest of the world are declining precipitously, largely because of American foreign policy. And if you want people who are desperate not to flee the homes that they don't want to leave, it's worth addressing that instead of acting like you can put barbed wire up at a border and expect to, through sheer force and violence, keep people from fleeing situations that are already so violent that they're willing to give up everything to leave them.
More Rising right after this.